Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News, and as Ferrari explained their plans for the major engine upgrades they're looking to bring to the Miami Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc also is very adamant indeed that a major mistake he made at the Imola Grand Prix that cost him a fair few points is not going to happen ever again. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it, all that good stuff. Thank you very much indeed for that one. First of all, we're going to talk about McLaren a little bit because, well, this livery was spotted in the Rocket League game. Now, I believe Lando Norris has come out to say, unfortunately, that this will not be getting transferred into real life, but it would be great to see at Miami. Speaking of liveries though, and kind of car concepts in general, the Formula E Generation 3 cars were kind of revealed yesterday. At the bottom here, they kind of look like a fighter jet. Some people like them, some people certainly do not. But they are substantially, or at least quite significantly, you look at the dimensions, they're slightly shorter, they're slightly kind of thinner, and they're actually more like, they're more powerful actually, so they're effectively going to be faster, lighter, and smaller. And that is generally the idea that Formula 1 wants to go down as well. Our understanding of the 2026 regulations right now, effectively, they want to keep the cars like as safe as they are right now, but pretty much make them smaller and lighter, which obviously are the two key concerns with the current cars being probably too large, too sluggish, this type of stuff. So probably they're going to take some lessons out of these books, it seems, at the moment. This also just to mention that was kind of interesting, right? Because all these new cars, all the talk was like, yeah, the cars are much better for overtaking, that type of stuff. Of course, like a lot of these years, you can't really like accurately compare them, just because a lot of the first 4 races of the seasons have been very different. But still, I thought it was rather interesting that only 32 and a bit pretty much overtakes have happened on average over the first 4 races of the season. That's well, pretty comparable really to the previous seasons as well. And yes, there's been different tracks and stuff like this. Imola obviously wasn't great for it, right? But I'm pretty sure there was only like maybe 18 or 19 overtakes in the entirety of the Imola race. So kind of excluding that one, and of course there was a DRS discussion, all this type of stuff as well. Like probably 2022 will be better than some of these other years, but it's by no means guaranteed that it's far and away better for racing and stuff. But maybe part of it is just due to the fact that a couple of the teams in Red Bull and Ferrari are significantly better right now than the rest of the field. This I thought was also kind of interesting, right? Those numbers might have been somewhat better that we just looked at if there was no sprint race, for example, because there was an 18 overtaking maneuvers in the sprint race. Of course, part of that may be helped by DRS that wasn't quite as effective maybe in the race itself because it activated too late and some of the DRS trains were pretty brutal, but also mainly due to the fact that Perez and Sainz were arguably out of position from qualifying, and therefore they could make some moves up the field, which obviously wasn't the case once kind of the grid sorted itself out. So just generally more sprint discussion, given that they're looking to update to 6 sprints next year. Let's talk about this then, because of course towards the end of the race, looked like Charles Leclerc was going to come home for a pretty comfortable 3rd place. He decided to push for more. The team wanted to push for more. They changed to the softs, tried to say, okay, Red Bull, put the softs in as well. Let's give this a go for the last few laps. He was getting close to Perez, could have maybe taken him. Not sure he'd have had him at the end of the race. The Red Bull just had more pace on the day, but of course Leclerc made that mistake through the chicane, goes into the wall pretty much, does very well to actually survive that, has to change his front wing, and then goes back to make up a couple more places, finishes P6, I believe, which cost him 7 points to where he would have been if he'd just come home safely and not try to do anything dodgy effectively. Now, well, he's effectively said in an article right here that came out on Autosport that, look, this is a one-time mistake, it's not going to happen again. Of course, he's kind of known the previous couple of seasons for making fair few mistakes. We've seen at Baku, for example, and last year even, there was, Sainz actually finished above Leclerc in terms of a points tally at the end of the season, largely because Leclerc, whenever they both finished in the top 10 or the top 6, Leclerc was almost always ahead, but often Sainz would be, Mr. Consistent, right, finishing the races week in, week out in the points. Leclerc clarifies it's one of those mistakes that just is a bit more on the mental approach. It just kind of happens at that particular moment of the race, but I've always been strong in knowing exactly what particular feeling I felt at what moment of the race and how to correct it. So yeah, again, it's a mistake, but I'll learn from it and will not do it again. Goes on to clarify that, look, this wasn't to do with cracking under pressure, as kind of the Red Bull guys were saying. We're putting the pressure on them, Leclerc's cracking already, the Ferrari guys buckling under the pressure of being number 1 in both championships. Leclerc said, look, that's not the case. We've obviously had pressure not just for the race, but for the whole weekends, and in fairness, right, it was in front of the home crowd at Imola, there was going to be more pressure on board, but he says, look, I don't think that was to do with it here. It was a mistake that cost me a lot. I'll learn from it, but no, on my side, there wasn't any particular added pressure. He admits he even got a bit lucky, right, with that mistake. I still got a bit lucky. I only lost 7 points. I could have scored, I could have scored 0, right, at the end of the day, if he hit the barrier a little bit differently, but at 7 points, that could be valuable at the end of the season. Every point counts when you're driving for the title, so yeah, it will not happen again. He makes it very clear indeed. Now, speaking of Ferrari, we saw this quite a while ago in the middle of April, that they're planning a 10 horsepower upgrade on their second power unit, their second ICE, seemingly, that they want to bring in for Miami. Now, we believe that this was already put in Carlos Sainz's car at Imola and seemed to do some pretty good things in the sprint race, and of course we didn't see what it was capable of in the real race because he got shunted around the corner on the first lap, but apparently that was in there. Now, there's some other upgrades they're working on as well, especially the energy recovery system. We'll see that here in a second, but yeah, they believe that if their reliability reliability data is good. That's what they said a while ago, that they were going to bring that through, and also suspension changes, kind of like aerodynamics change and stuff like this, that Red Bull have started to bring in, and really the upgrades here for Ferrari haven't really materialized as of yet, until now it seems, because well, this was confirmed yesterday. We looked at it very briefly in yesterday's video, but yes, they will run with more power from the engine in Miami, so not sure this necessarily means they're bringing through the new ICE as of yet, but they believe they have more power to be unlocked for this engine, and well, if they do that, that might be key to, well, keeping the straight line speed up with the Red Bulls as it has been at times. So that's definitely the plan for Ferrari. Also going to debut some new updated hybrid parts, so like finally some upgrades seem to be arriving here for Ferrari in Miami, and then maybe Barcelona right after that. That seems to be the plan. That's where a lot of teams apparently are going to bring a few new things. Certainly Mercedes will have to if they want to even have any chance this season to do anything of particular note. And I've just seen this as I was editing everything together here, actually, from Giuliano to Kessa. Thought I've got to throw this in. This is the advantage seemingly that Ferrari currently right now have already over Mercedes, in addition potentially to these upgrades they're going to bring through. So supposedly they've around about a 15 horsepower advantage over what Mercedes bring into the party. Last year, of course, at the end of last season, like, the Mercedes car was very dominant indeed. The engine that Hamilton had in his car from pretty much Brazil onwards seemed to just be smoking everyone, and they reckon that's, or Giuliano reckons that was about a 20 horsepower discrepancy that Ferrari had last year compared to what Mercedes had. This year it's almost entirely the other way around, in addition potentially to these further upgrades they're going to bring through. Maybe this is including it, who knows, but still, this is rather substantial. We saw at Imola, for example, like, look, if it was a Ferrari or Red Bull right now stuck in that kind of train behind Gasly, you'd imagine that they would have had purely the straight line speed to get past Gasly, get past Albon, and actually get the race on. But wasn't the case with Mercedes, right? They're clearly struggling. That's been a discussion since the start of the season, really, that they're kind of certainly struggling with their straight line speeds. McLaren and Aston Martin don't seem particularly happy about it, to be honest, right? And obviously that didn't necessarily play out in terms of points, but it seems like, yes, indeed, that is the case. The Ferrari have way more in the tank. The I guess maybe the Alfa Romeo as well is in a similar boat, and Mercedes really have to think about this, right? Because if the Ferrari already have an advantage like this, and the straight line speed isn't there for Mercedes, like and maybe Red Bull are kind of in a similar boat up on Mercedes, and of course that just shows that the engine development work that Ferrari have done seemingly is far outstripping Mercedes. We know that this year there's that kind of like 10% or whatever, like a biofuel, which might be messing with exactly how Mercedes decided to design their engine. Ferrari might have got on top of that much better than Mercedes did, therefore they already have a significant advantage in terms of pure power and therefore straight line speed potential, and it doesn't seem like they're done just yet with the upgrades. And Ferrari actually go on to say the following: so the new ERS, the energy recovery system, is going to be introduced as late as possible so they can develop it for as long as possible. Kind of interesting, because there was some talk, okay, like when are they going to maybe introduce new upgrades on this front? But yeah, apparently there's a freeze on development after September the 1st. They're probably going to develop it as late as they possibly can to increase that, well, the effectiveness that it might indeed have. And also the MGUK, the kinetic part of the motor generation unit involved with the hybrid power units and stuff like this, is going to be new spec in line with this. So definitely they've got some upgrades planned. This might take quite some time, but in terms of pure engine power, Ferrari believe they're kind of, well, they've got more to come, to be honest. That does have, well, create a scary prospect, I guess, for Red Bull, especially did create a scary prospect after Australia. But now given what they did in, of course, in Imola, then maybe the championship will be very much an ebb and flow for the rest of the season. But yeah, Ferrari can get on top of their porpoising as well. You'd imagine their car will be competitive enough again to still, well, lead the championship for the rest of the season if these upgrades go as effectively as they are hoping they will. Now, I want to talk about the midfield real quick, because Valtteri Bottas, he certainly had a good run. Of course, are very much overshadowed by Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes for the last several years, but put him in a decent car at the top of the midfield. He's going to look like a very solid driver, as he has done so far this year. P6, P8 and P5 at all the races that he has finished. Of course, Saudi Arabia had a pretty difficult time over there. But and of course, there's been all this talk. What's the driver lineup going to look like in the future years? There's been rumours that Riccardo might be on his way out of McLaren, and Albert is like, okay, is Gasly going to come into that seat, or is Colton Herta going to come into that seat, as we looked at the current rumours American driver for the American market, this type of stuff. Now, Gasly himself has actually had some thoughts being known on this, because last season did a fantastic job in the Alpha Tauri, and people are like, okay, look, maybe he just kind of blew his chance at the Red Bull, was a bit too early for him, maybe another chance in that seat is actually the way to go for Gasly. But so far this season hasn't been particularly good. Tsunoda pretty much comprehensively outperformed him in the most recent race in Imola, and well, this is what Gasly had to say last night. I see Charles in a Ferrari, I see Max in the Red Bull, George in the Mercedes, Lando in the McLaren, kind of like guys in his generation, you could argue, even though I'm pretty sure he's older than all these guys by at least a year or two. I think Gasly's 26, Charles and Max are like a 24, they're born within like 16 days of each other, something crazy like that. George and Lando around the same age. I've been fighting with these guys all my career. I know that's where I belong, and I want to get my chance to be in this position as well. So of course, yeah, you've got Charles, you've got Max, you've got George, you've got Lando. Those are the top 4 teams, right, in theory: Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull. And of course, Gasly's kind of stuck in that sister team over at Alpha Tauri, looking for an opportunity elsewhere. Now, of course, the opportunity you'd imagine that might arrive for Gasly could be in the kind of sister seat in the Red Bull, right? That's kind of where he's been before, if Perez isn't there anymore. Of course, like, who knows what happens with Mercedes, for example. Let's say Hamilton retires after this year, like, there's a seat open there. here. Could Gasly step into that team? Who knows exactly what happens here, but like he's being very clear that like, look, he wants to compete, he wants to win world championships. This is what he has to say as well on potentially returning back to Red Bull. There's a conversation we need to have that we didn't have yet. Right now, I think it's probably too early because it's also only 2022 that focuses on making the best season possible that we can with AlphaTauri. But I'm sure there are going to be conversations and see what is good. I know they are happy with the way it worked for them at the moment, and that also works for me. Checo, that being Perez, doing very well over there, so it makes sense. But then again, at the end of the day, I also need to look at my own career and what's best for me. What will give me the most chances to achieve my personal goals would just to be a world champion over the next few years, right? So he's basically saying, look, I belong with those guys that are in the best cars. I need to get back to that point. If they're going to stick with Perez over the next few years, which they'd probably be silly not to, frankly, but based on the way he's been performing lately. And Perez also made it clear that, like, look, I'm not just here to be the second place, right? I'm here to try and beat Max. I want to beat Max. So do the engineers. Like, it creates a good atmosphere within the team, as he describes right here. And he also went on to say, like, look, I'm not just here to be a support guy. Like, look, if I'm out of the championship and Max is fighting for it, yes, I'm going to do my job. It would be the same the other way around, as of course Perez did in Abu Dhabi last year, for example. But he also makes it very clear that, like, look, Red Bull gives me the opportunity to fight for the championship. Nowhere does it say that I have to be behind Max. If he's won, it's because he's been stronger on track. I feel like I have the opportunity to be a world champion with Red Bull, and it would be a lack of respect towards me and towards my career just to be in Formula 1, knowing that I do not aspire to anything, right? So basically saying, like, look, I'm still here to compete, and Gasly's probably looking at the way Perez has been performing and thinking, well, they're probably not going to get rid of Perez, right, for the next couple of years. Might well offer him like a 2-year contract extension after this position, which then leaves Gasly in a bit of an interesting spot, because if the Red Bull seat isn't available, then he's not really going to want to stay in AlphaTauri, right, kind of on the hope that that's going to come around the corner. He might want to, well, see some other options. Mercedes might be there, like McLaren might be there, right, if the seat becomes available for Riccardo, for example. Like, probably it's not going anywhere for Ferrari, so those seemingly are the only cars that can compete for championships. So that's probably what Gasly's looking at, right, potentially leaving the Red Bull ecosystem over the coming years. Intriguing perspective in the comment section below. Just a couple of things to finish up with, actually. That 58 points that Red Bull achieved is pretty much the highest points ever that a constructor has had in a race weekend, just behind the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, where Williams, I believe, came second and third on the podium that weekend. And 2014, they had this interesting idea where the final race of the season, I believe, would have double points. So, like, there was kind of more on the line, I suppose. So the championship was more interesting towards the end, and there was more of a swing that could happen at the end of the season. Kind of an interesting idea. But, I mean, yeah, Williams, I think, was second and third on the podium, with Hamilton winning it, and therefore they got 66 points between them. But including the sprint and the actual race itself, Red Bull pretty much maximised on what they could have done. But in terms of 1-2 finishes, they're still, like, what, 67 behind, where Ferrari are leading the way at 85, with Mercedes, well, quite significantly far behind still, even after their dominant turbo hybrid era. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.